For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that he and Coop, believing in him, should not perish but have everlasting life. I was thinking about this heart attack business because, of course, it came out of the blue. Here I am, a busy public life as a clergyman, and really kind of having to assess where I'm up to with things. Suddenly, the focuses of life change a little bit. Some things become more important and other things become less important, because you realise that kind of life is a bit fragile, really. So I sat there and realised I had to make a decision. The specialist had assured me that I was okay, the heart was fine, the heart wasn't damaged. I realised I had to make a decision. Do I be ill for the rest of my life, sit down, watch television and do nothing else? Or do I decide to get on with it? Because the specialist had said to me, Ian, he said, you've had as good a heart attack as you can have and get away with it. So it was kind of serious. It did actually switch me off. So I thought, well, if I'm not really ill, I'm not going to be ill. I'm going to get up and go. And that's what I did. But that was how I treated the heart attack. It wasn't going to stop life, it wasn't going to stop work or anything like that, because I believed what the specialist said, that heart was okay, nothing wrong with it. It was just a question of, in my mind, deciding to get on with it and not kind of lie underneath it thinking, I'm ill, am I going to have another one any day or anything like that, which is what I did, and that was fine as far as that went. And so far, or these many years later, it's still the same. Everything's okay as far as that's concerned. But then, of course, the day came for me to go back to work. The day I had to stand up in public and take a service in church. And I was fine, early in the morning, no trouble at all, looking forward to taking a service again. Walked in with the choir, then stood up to take the service, announced the first hymn, and then the world ended. Or it felt like it. I was having something I'd never had before in my life. As a counsellor, I talked to many people about panic attacks. But of course, when you've never had one, you don't really know exactly what they're like. And you try to talk to people through that kind of experience. But suddenly, just at the flick of a switch, you might say, I was having a panic attack. And I thought the world was going to end. All the usual things you feel, sweaty, clammy, nauseous, am I dying kind of question, from what we're going to do, where do I go, do I run away, do I disappear in the room, do I lie on the floor? All sorts of questions are flashing through your mind. Well, it was a terrible experience. I mean, now I know what a panic attack is, and dear me, it wasn't very nice, to say the least. I now really knew what people were talking about when they talked to me about panic attacks in my counselling surgery. So I'm stood there in front of about 80 people. We're singing a hymn. I can't sing, I'm just stood there with all this racing through my mind. I've got about 2 minutes to get myself into some kind of order before I have to actually say something on my own again. And the thought I got in my mind was, the doctor says, there's nothing wrong with your heart, you're not ill, you've got to decide to get on with it, kind of thing. And I kept telling myself this. So what I did was, I said to myself, I'm having kind of an argument with myself now in this little space of 2 minutes. look, there's nothing wrong with you. This is completely irrational. There's really no reason for this. You're not ill. Your heart's fine. There's nothing else going on. This is all irrational rubbish that's running around your head. Get over it. Get away from it. The doctor says there's nothing wrong with your heart. That was it. And I just kept saying that over and over again to myself, kind of having an argument with myself. And by the time they had finished, I was just okay to say the next thing. Funnily enough, of course, there were a couple of ladies in the congregation that realised what was going on because they'd had these things themselves. They didn't tell me at the time, they told me later on that they noticed there was something going on. But that really kind of brought me up with a bit of a start having this panic attack, because I realised that this is something else now. This is something new. This is something I've got to get in charge of. And just like I made the decision about the heart attack, do I decide to be ill for the rest of my life and sit underneath it kind of thing, or do I get on with it? I realised I had to make the same kind of decision now with the panic attack. I had to decide whether these things were going to run my life or whether I was going to conquer them. Of course, I realised there was only one decision really to make, and that was I had to conquer them. Otherwise, life would be hell. And that's what I did. I decided I had the power, because these things are totally irrational. They're not an illness as such. They're irrational things that we let run round our heads for all sorts of reasons that trigger them. But nevertheless, I decided I had the power to sort these things out in my own head, because that's where they were seated, in your head. And that's what I did. It took me several months, maybe up to about 9 months, but gradually I got on top of these things. Gradually their effect got less and less until they really got to a vague thought in the back of my head sometimes, but nothing at all. So that worked for me. That's when I decided. And now when I talk to people about panic attacks in my counselling surgery, that's what I talk to them about. That what we don't realise sometimes, the power we have to decide things. Now, of course, if I've got a broken arm, I can't decide I haven't got a broken arm. That's silly. I've got a broken arm. But things that are in my head that are purely psychological, you might say, just digging up rubbish that gets jumbled together, that makes you run around in circles inside your head, and this spiral's just getting worse and worse. I decided that had to go. That I couldn't let that run life, because otherwise, life would just be a total misery if I let these things carry on. So that's what I decided to do, and that's what I did. And for me, it worked. To take charge of them, to realise I had the power to decide. If we can just get a better idea in our heads, we can change. And when we change one thing, we can change something else. Once we realise we've got that bit of power, we can use that same thing to overcome something else, you see. It snowballs. That's what it's all about, really. For God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that he and Coop, believing in him, should not perish but have everlasting life.